Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Dachihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. But if you've been following along for, I don't know, however long we've been doing these things, then you already know that. Let me just double check a setting here to make sure that we're in the right place. All right. Been having some internet glitches and whatnot going on. I don't know if it's from the cold weather or whatever, but we're going to get through this. For those of you who are watching this via a recording later, it's not going to matter much unless you see some glitches or whatever. I'm actually talking back and forth with the folks that show up live as we record these. Okay. All right. So this week's training is part of a 3-week kind of series that I've been doing between our Monday Kuden and our Whiteboard Wednesday, and then our Friday masterclass training within a kind of a pocket or a packet of things. And I'll go into these principles and concepts. If you've been following along, you probably know what's going on and whatnot. But we started really high level with what the principles and concepts are and how they can kind of manifest in techniques and whatnot. And then week 2, again, this is a mini series within this full context, right? So week 2, we took a look at the differences between Budo Taijutsu or Bujutsu itself and Nimpo Taijutsu or Ninjutsu itself. And while one is inclusive of the other, by default, doesn't work the same way in the other direction, okay? So I will have a cautionary tale here for you. Anyway, so Monday, so 2 days ago, right, our Kuden podcast. So if you're not familiar with those, we are on every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we're covering things from more of a life mastery, personal development kind of thing, but how you would integrate these kind of things both ways, right? So most of the stuff is not just battlefield things. They're also for life mastery and a whole bunch of different areas of our lives, okay? Ninja are not the martial arts is my life kind of people, okay? So what we're doing is kind of prepping for the Friday masterclass. So even though I went through the 3 different types of ninja, generally speaking, within a clan, specifically focusing on the Togakure school, our oldest ninja lineage in the Bujinkan, there are these 3 types, right? There's the Genin field agents. There's the Chunin. Some people call them field commanders. Some people call them middle management, whatever. But they're more like the coordinators and controls, right? If you're familiar with the James Bond movies, right? You got M, who sends Bond and, by implication, everybody else out and has very specific missions for them. They're supposed to do something very specific. Not that Bond always does. But this guy's, code name or whatever is M. I think in the stories, M doesn't mean anything, but in many different clandestine services around the world, they do use the letter C, or they just use the term control, and that's that person's job, right? So what we were looking at on Monday during Kuden was how the ninjutsu and how and when or why any one of these roles, right, would engage in physical combat, right? And we're going to talk about that again today, but from a very specific perspective, okay? So Genin field agents, the ones that go out and do the stuff that everybody swoons over and gets all warm and fuzzy and excited in other ways, maybe when they see them in movies and shit like that, right? Chunin, the coordinators, the controls, and then you have the Jonin, right? There's only one of them, okay? So there's several Chunin, but the vast majority of folks within a ninja clan are in the Genin class. If you have a copy of the Bansen Shukai, or even Shidoshi Stephen Hayes' book, I know he's got some other title these days or whatever, but when I left that circle, that's pretty much what it was. But either way, he wrote a book, The Art of Ancient Ninja Warfare, I think, right? A long time ago. And a bunch of people got their buns all in a rustle because it's like an English translation of a certain part or certain parts of the Bansen Shukai. And he didn't credit that anywhere in the book. He didn't have to. It's not a direct translation or anything like that. It's just as if you would have learned anything else in school or learned things and then came up with your own way of applying it, whatnot, and then you share your particular approach or system. You don't have to say that this is based on other things. Now, some of us do. Like, I didn't make all this stuff up. This came from many different teachers, Hatsumi Sensei, many Japanese master teachers, some Western teachers, and a whole lot of freaking research and trial and error applying this stuff between being a civilian and doing private and professional security and being a military cop. So anyway, so the three different types, and then how that would be applied. If you're one of my local guys or one of my guys in the Ninpo Masterclass or in our online distance learning program in the platinum levels, then you might have been on for the virtual training during, or the virtual Zoom kind of thing for last night's class. And what we were looking at is how a chunin or a jonin applies Ninpo Taijutsu, right? And there were bruises all around, and there were people with depressed eye sockets and all kinds of shit. Anyway, so, but what we have to remember for all of these characters across the board is that ninjutsu is not applied, right? Ninpo Taijutsu or any of these fighting techniques they're not applied the same way most people think about fighting or self-defense or martial arts, right? This head-to-head, toe-to-toe kind of thing, right? It's not that way. In the Togakure school, one of the most secret principles is indirect engagement, right? What that means is you never engage with an attacker head on, right? You always come in at blind angles, and they're either physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or some combination of all of them, right? And depending on how those principles get applied, or depending on which role we're talking about, Jonin, Chunin, Genin, that's how they get applied. However, the core principle across the lineage and the reason why things are applied the way they are, and this is really, really important because this is where we're going to start separating people out. Not that you can't watch these trainings and whatnot, but I have a little warning for you here soon. The primary goal for a ninja doing anything, whether they're actively on a mission or they are at home, traveling to and from, whatever, is always the protection and, by implication, secrecy, right, of the lineage, right, of the clan, okay? And I think this makes this perfectly suited for I'm not going to pick an age range. For us, it's typically between 25 and 55, but it could push as far as 70, 75 as far as age, right? But this is like professional or professionally minded men and women who have built a life that they'd like to protect, right? Family, that kind of thing. So while that description applies to a lot of people, there's a certain couple of personality types that really gravitate toward this because they lack certain needs, desires, weaknesses, personal character traits or whatever, that the person who has those, this is not good enough. It's not going to fulfill that thing. And this is a matter of perspective, okay? But in ninjutsu, perspective matters, okay? So the theme for this week, again, is ninja night fighting tactics. Not knife, ninja night fighting. So we're going to be looking at not only operating in darkness or in low light situations, whether they're outside or they're maybe you're in a building, right, where the lights went out. Either you did it or somebody else did it so you can maximize things. But we're going to take a look at using this idea of light and darkness, right, as a weapon. Right? In ninjutsu, everything and anything can be used as a weapon, including that person's own belief system, everything, right? So we're going to take a look at maximizing this thing, right, and being able to use it, okay? So primary focus is deception and mastery in low light conditions, okay? And then so what we're going to be taking a look at is using the Togakure ninjas' use of darkness, right, and low light conditions, again, as weapons themselves, okay? So, but which ninja? Because I just named generally three primary types: Jonin, Chunin, Genin. Okay, so our focus today is on the Genin. Okay, Ge, right? You can say Ge if you want, but it would be missing an I. Okay, Genin, right? Nin here in this context is not nin like persevere, endure, like ninja, that kind of thing. This nin means person. Okay, and then Ge here is low, right? So generally translated, this is translated as low man or low person or whatever. What that means is they're the pawns, right? They're the operatives, the field agents and stuff. Okay, so while all the movies would have us believe that they're going to go rushing in solo into who knows, right? A mafia-controlled casino or whatever, and take on the entire family one-on-one. And while that really gets us all jazzed, every fight seems to be head-on, right? Yeah, I know they've got tricks and they got shuriken and all that, but he sees me, I see him, and I throw the shuriken right at him. That's not indirect engagement. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how the Genin operative, in a mission, to and from, whatever, would use this. Okay, and we're going to stay on the stealth side of things. Okay, so again, as I mentioned this warning. So as a warning, whether you go through part of this, you go through the whole thing, doesn't matter to me. Okay, but if what I'm teaching today seems like it's not what you're looking for, or if you personally have to have bragging rights after you win a fight, or after you've saved yourself or somebody else in a self-defense situation, right? Or if you think all of this stuff here is not necessary, man, because you've got these fight skills, man. That's my thing. That's my jam. Toe to toe, nose to nose, take this guy out, right? Then my suggestion is that you just stick with Budo Taijutsu if you are in the Bujinkan, Jininkan, Genbukan, whatever, okay? Or whatever martial art or martial arts or fight systems you're currently doing and you're really good at, okay? The problem that we have to approach this from, and where Ninjutsu really shines, is that the majority of martial artists, fighters, self-defense students and whatnot, they don't get that when we're talking about pure self-protection, survival, that kind of thing, there's just this reality that it's not always a good idea to engage that way with certain attackers, right? Or even have them know who you are, right? As I've told my teenagers several times in several different phases as they've been growing up, is you've got great ideas. You're a really smart person, right? And you gave it your best shot at this approach, which was always whatever mom and dad aren't doing, right? Or doing the opposite or whatever. The problem that you're missing is that you don't see things big enough, okay? Because ultimately people still try to translate self-defense, self-protection, survival, that kind of thing. And it shows up in the movies as well, especially here in the West, as though it's the same thing as fighting, like a fair fight back and forth, right? So we have to be really, really careful with this, right? So what we're looking at on one side here is, using deception and manipulation and overwhelm and a whole bunch of other things that we'll go into here very, very quickly. The ninja way kind of thing, right? But the other thing that we're looking at is adding not just new skills, because most of these are not new skills. All the techniques that Advanced and my Shinobi Kai students did last night were not new. They knew most, if not all, of the kata or forms that we use as a basis for everything. They know all those. What we did was we applied this overlay, okay? Because ninjutsu, it's not that thing. So what we're looking at here is not adding new skills. We might be adding new ways to do those skills, going to talk about specifically walking and rolling. Okay, walking's walking and rolling's rolling, right? No. Anyway, but what we're actually looking at here is a very advanced concept, at least as I got from my teachers, Hatsumi Sensei, several Japanese master teachers, my Western teachers, is that at a certain point, we need to start looking at how we're going to use our skills, and if any given skill is even applicable in different scenarios, right? Different environments, those kind of things, right? So maybe taking a look at being in the dark, right? So if someone doesn't understand stealth, right? And when I say understand, I mean deep in their bones, in their muscle memory. That means that everything they do all the time is done with a minimizing of one or more of these 7 characteristics. Okay? We call them in the military and in a lot of survival training. We have these 7 S's that are introduced if you have to apply things like camouflage, concealment, stealth, whether you're moving, stationary, whatever. We introduced this to intermediate students, mid Q levels, I think, with shelter building, because they may be in a situation where they don't want to be seen, interrupted, or whatever. So, and that goes for humans as well as it does for predatory animals. So we want to give these things to them so that they can make sure that they have, hopefully all of them, but as many of these things as possible, because the more we have going on for us in any given situation, right, the less we're going to be detectable. Okay. All right. So got tons to go through here. So as I always do, for those of you who are on all the time, Okay. So let's do this first, right? Let's go down through the 7 S's, right? And I'm just going to lay these things out. I'll just give you a 1-liner, 2-liner, whatever for each thing, why it's important and all that. But a lot of these things people tend to overlook. But if we understand this, then in night fighting, low light conditions, balancing light and shadow, those kind of things, often we're not using these, we're exploiting them because he doesn't use them. Okay? So there's an omote and an ura, an in and a yin yang to everything. Okay? So in no particular order, right? We have shape. Right? Stealth involves being able to break up not just the human form itself, but how the subconscious mind recognizes a human being at a distance. Okay? And what it recognizes is a small triangle, say it, small triangle over a larger triangle. Okay? Unless somebody is really big, and then they're going to see a circle in which the person's pretty camouflaged anyway. Okay? So shape, sound, right? Everybody's really good at rolling, but are you good at rolling for stealth? And do you know how to do it on different types of surfaces? Right? Because sound is created by friction, the contact or rubbing together of 2 opposing surfaces. Okay? So we have to understand friction to understand the reduction of sound. Right? Shape, sound, silhouette. Okay. Most people think that that ninja uniforms way back in the day were like they show up in the movies. Okay. Especially that all black kind of thing. And you would have to be in a place where it is like no starry sky. So it's overcast. You're out so far away from civilization that actually blends in with the darkness, because there's no light to reflect off of objects to pass through the eye to hit the retina and be processed, right? So, but otherwise, it's going to look like a specter or a shadow moving along. And if we haven't broken up this, or we haven't dealt with this, which is there's a certain rhythm or rhythmic pattern to human movement that's different than four-legged animal movement. Okay? Very different. Okay? So shape, sound, silhouette, shadow. Right? Careful when you're hiding that you don't project a shadow. Right? That while you're hiding or you think that he can't see you, meanwhile, you get this weird thing going on. Shape, sound, silhouette, shadow, shine. Okay? Reflective surfaces. That's why military people and police units, in certain instances and whatnot, use grease paint and whatnot, camouflage, because they're not just creating a camouflage pattern that blends in with the woods or whatever. They're using things in a certain way that removes the shine and breaks up that shape. Okay, when you put on grease paint, right, contrary to what you see in the movies, there's certain like light colors go in certain places on the face, dark colors go in other places. But if you put dark colors where it's already recessed and it's going to be dark, it just makes it darker and easier to see, right? So last thing you want to do is highlight your ocular sockets, right? Same thing with light. You put light paint where it's normally light and reflective. I don't care what your skin tone is. You just highlighted it. Okay? It's like putting makeup on instead of dampening things, right? So there's a science to these things, and not just, you looked up a YouTube video or three and decided, oh, that's easy, just do it, right? Anyway, shape, sound, silhouette, shadow, shine, shit. Two just dropped out of my head. Sorry. It happens all the time, but that's why I carry when I'm out on like wilderness survival stuff or whatever. I carry like a little reminder cards or a little packet that is it's sealed in, right? That lamination stuff. So anyway, where's my note? Do I have it? I don't know. Maybe it'll pop into my head along the way. Either way, we'll see. If it pops into my head, we'll just throw it up there. Okay. But there's 5 of the 7. We'll just keep moving. Right. And for those of you who are trying to interact online because you're doing the live thing, I don't have my chat thing up because when I do that, people have the ability and have used it in the past to hijack the feed and make their comments pop up on the screen. And I don't want that to happen. So if you are popping things in or whatever, I always check it after the training is over. Okay. So anyway, think about shape, right? If they even out of the corner of their eye, right? If their brain identifies, even at a subconscious level, a human shape or form, they're going to look. Okay. Same thing with movement and those kind of things, right? Same thing with sound, right? We're bipeds. You know that already, right? We have 2 points of contact with the ground, unless we're crawling, in which case we have 6, not 4. Now, I know you could try to bring your knees up off the floor, but it makes you not ass heavy. It makes you shoulder and head heavy. So certain limbs hit the ground at a different time. We are not naturally, at least at this point in human history and evolution, four-legged animals. Four-legged animals and different types of animals move with a certain type of pattern. The general pattern is a 1, heavy 2, 1 pattern where they move a limb, 2 limbs, 1 limb. Okay. And again, it's different if they're walking, that kind of thing, as opposed to trotting or just all out running. Okay. Cats are a little bit different depending on the cat, where it might have a light, where both front paws come down, and then a heavy push off kind of thing. So ba-boom, ba-boom. Human beings have a 1-2 rhythm, right? 1, 2, 1, because we're bilateral on both sides. Same thing, block, punch, those kind of things. So Ninpo Taijutsu goes out of its way to teach within skills and techniques and whatnot, as long as the student has a teacher that learned this stuff as well, goes out of its way to change that rhythm. Because whether he hears it in a stealth situation or he sees it in a fight, he can fit into that rhythm. It's not that difficult. He's using the same rhythm, right? So one of the things we end up learning how to do is disrupting that rhythm. 1, it disguises human movement if it's a stealth situation, but 2, it breaks up and distorts the rhythm he's expecting subconsciously in his brain, and it sends mixed messages, and really it breaks a mental type of balance, right? Causes confusion. Okay, so anyway, silhouette, same thing. We talked about that. Shadow, shine, right? So if these other things pop up, I'm sure they're buried in my notes here somewhere. We'll come up with it. Okay. Anyway, the key takeaways I want you to have today is understanding. This will be new. Understanding the moon element. What the hell is that? Okay. This is a principle of indirect engagement, reflection, and stealth within the Togakure school. The Togakure school has a body of knowledge that is considered to be the secret of secrets of that lineage. Okay. And so if you've heard of the Tonko no Jutsu, right? Tonko roughly translates to escape, concealment, that kind of thing, right? Think guerrilla warfare tactics, right? That's broken down into 3 sections itself, right? So there's the Goton Po that some people have heard of. This is the Omote, right? These are the Chinese 5 elements, right? The Gogyo, right? Water, wood, fire, earth, metal, that kind of thing. And it's using, those things are symbolic of using fire or water or the land and geography, fire, that kind of stuff, right? But then there's the Ura Goton, right? And so these have very cryptic names like bird of prey, stuff like that, right? I'm not going into these things this time. What we're pulling from is one element from something known as the Tento Juppo no Jutsu, okay? These are 10 elements. And the ninja used everything. So what we have are the names of elements: sun, snow, fog or mist, those kind of things, moon in this case. All of these things are symbolic and highlight principles and concepts for the ninja to use that are very specific, right? So these were more like frameworks, right? So if we say moon, that means something very specific. There's certain types of principles and concepts. I'll get to that in a minute, okay? Same thing if we say sun, whatever, okay? So there's a lot of stuff to it, right? So maybe someday I'll do a whole course on the Tonko Ninjutsu. Maybe, who knows? Anyway, so but we're gonna dive into this moon element. That again, the theme for the last 3 weeks has been on this indirect engagement, right? Never meeting an attacker head on, or an opponent, an enemy, whatever, head on, and also the Togakure, or just the general ninja truth or reality that nothing in ninjutsu is ever what it looks like, right? So, but indirect engagement, reflection, stealth, there's a whole bunch of stuff to it, okay? And the other thing that this is looking at is applying environmental awareness to manipulate light, shadow, sound, those kind of things for combat advantage, okay? So, and then the other thing that I want you to get is this. I'm going to give you some practical strategies for disorienting and evading an attacker in urban and rural low light conditions. Okay. Again, for those of you who are new to this format, Whiteboard Wednesday is not the dancing monkey demonstrating things. This is tactics and strategies that you can take and apply to whatever it is you're doing. Okay. If you want to work with us to learn more, or a teacher that knows this stuff the way it should be done, great, right? You can reach out to me or reach out to one of them or whatever, and I'm sure they can help you. Just be cautious, because there's a lot of people out there that think ninjutsu is just a bunch of shit thrown together, and it all really just revolves around fighting and trickery. Okay? I think those people either don't want to take the time and work to learn something else, or they have an incessant need to be seen as the credible authority, right? They want to be Hatsumi Sensei, or they want to be the master. So if they make up their own stuff that they already kind of know or are good at, well, then, and you can call anything you want, whatever you want, okay? Most of my students have heard me use the old Abraham Lincoln question / quote, right? How many legs does a dog have? That's 4. Okay, well, let's for a moment say that the tail is a leg. Now, how many legs does the dog have? I'll wait. Nope, still has 4. Just because we call the tail a leg doesn't make it so. Okay, you'll save your sanity if you apply natural reason and logic to things, right? Universal truth, not personal truth that somebody else is trying to push forward because they need that agenda to be picked up by everybody else, because otherwise they don't have the wherewithal, the aptitude, or the desire, right, to figure life out for themselves. So they just want everybody else to do whatever they want, and they think that they have that right simply because they exist, not because they produce anything. Okay? Yeah, I know. This is how warriors think, not. Anyway, we'll leave that. All right, so let's do this. Okay. So again, I've already introduced you to this idea, and if you've been along for the last 3 weeks, this mini course, or for however many, I mean, we're somewhere in the 2-year mark for how long Whiteboard Wednesday has been running. You've heard the nothing in Ninjutsu is ever what it looks like. So you've heard that. Okay. How the moon element symbolizes, again, reflection. It also represents subtlety, indirect influence in combat, that kind of thing. Think about the moon, right? The moon reflects. We can see the moon because it's in a position between us and it, where it's like a mirror, right? The sun is reflected off the moon. It's indirect lighting, as opposed to the sun, that's everything's out in the open, right? So in Togakure school, if we're talking about things from the sun's perspective, very, very different, okay? So there's subtle influences, right? The position of the moon to the gravitational pull of Earth creates the tides and waves and weather patterns, or it influences weather patterns and things like that. So we're talking about influence and stuff like that, not direct grab them by the throat and do what you want. We may grab them by the throat, but it's always going to be from a blind angle and up or in from outside of their peripheral vision, so they never see it coming. Okay, that kind of thing, right? So, and remember that, because as we do tactical maneuvering in the dark, that's important as well. Okay, all right. So, and then again, we're staying on with this idea of not engaging head on, and instead using perception or things that control their perception, right? We're using the environment and we're using deception to dominate or escape. Okay, so again, focusing in on the Genin, right? Genin level ninja use these principles for active missions. Okay, the Chunin using these principles was always in reading or influencing the thoughts, words, plans, or actions of other human beings, right? Including in the way they selected and or nurtured and or detected their own Genin agents that might have been turned by the enemy, that kind of stuff, right? They were masters of human nature. Okay, so a lot of people get confused when we cover this stuff because, well, Hatsumi Sensei's taught that stuff, and well, I talk about Jonin stuff. Well, Hatsumi Sensei's taught that stuff, and the Genin stuff. Well, yeah, okay, because Hatsumi Sensei is a Jonin, and he's training us all to be Jonin. So Jonin understand how these other ones operate. The question is when, how often, or why would a Jonin have to physically get involved in an altercation? When would a Chunin have to do that? The Genin, way more often. That's why they make the best ninja for movies. We all want to see some lone guy, right? How we fantasize about ourselves. I know, I used to do that too, right? Going in there and taking on the fucking killers of the world and being the guy at the end. There's a lot of tombstones for the guys at the end as well. Anyway, all right, so historical insight here. Night missions, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this Tonko no Jutsu idea, where this moon element comes from, this is the shiznit in the Togakure-Ryu, right? Whether they're climbing walls or using Metsubishi to blind somebody, or they're using fire as a distraction, or whatever. All this cool shit all gets categorized and classified and comes out of this full body of knowledge. Okay. So it is at its core about survival, right? And the relationship between the moon, right? And again, this subtle manipulation of light and shadow, because if we're operating in the dark, moon also includes stars, believe it or not. Okay. There is an element in the Tento Jupo, these 10 elements called stars. Okay, that's another one. And so there's a little bit of overlap between a lot of these things, and it's only because, like, on a dark night, if you've ever been in the military or you've ever been out camping and you're just out in the middle of freaking nowhere, you can't even see the dome-like glow that identifies a city from a distance, from all the street lights and whatever's going on, right? If you can't even see that stuff, you know that if there's no cloud cover, you will see more stars than you ever thought you would ever see without a telescope. And that sky is lit up. And so the land is not dark, right? That we'd have to have like a major storm cover and whatnot to blanket that out and be that far away from cities and that glow and have nobody having fucking flashlights, fires going, whatever, to be talking about dark. Okay. So, light, when we're talking about light and shadow and the silhouette and those kind of things, all of these things matter. Nothing doesn't matter. Okay. What matters is the intensity of the light source and its position relative to you and your assailant. Okay. Really important stuff. Okay. But this is about strategic thinking and tactical operation, regardless of the techniques and skills you're using. Right? These are all of the what I call softer and visible skills that most people miss, even people that are supposed to be studying Ninjutsu. Right? So we have to be careful, right? And then the other thing is, again, this rhythmic disruption. I started talking about that with the sound and the human rhythmic pattern, right? Things that we would take a look at is varying your movement speed and direction to prevent predictable patterns. Okay, if I have to walk, if I have to roll, if I have to move, right? Especially in urban environments, right? Actual urban, city, suburban, those kind of things, right? There's going to be less opportunity to do what I'm about to say than there would be in more outlying suburban regions that are hinging on rural areas. Okay, I live in a semi-rural area. What that means is that all the big burgs around here, like the city that I live in, is a class 3 city. A lot of people would just say it's a large town. Anyway, it's an hour from any large city, north and south, both directions. Okay? So we don't get the influence of their light and whatnot. But this is semi-rural, because when you're living in town, that's more suburban. It's not really urban, because we don't have like really tall skyscrapers and a bunch of manufacturing plants and things like that change the landscape. We don't have things like that, right? It's mostly residential with a very defined business district, right? It's very, very different, okay? So semi-rural, but we're not that far off the main strip or roadway that goes past my academy here from literal rural farmland, right? And that makes up most of the stuff around us. Okay, so light sources are going to change dramatically. Okay, and so when I lay these things out, the reason I'm doing a big picture kind of thing is that I don't know your context. If you live in a big city, you're going to need to think about this stuff from more of a low light urban perspective, because you've got street lamps, you've got way more car headlights and stuff like that. To give you, for instance, one time we decided we were going to do night training in the dojo, right? Now, this particular facility, which we moved into about 10 years ago, before that, I owned a building, right, in the city where I live. And we had 2 really, really bad winters back to back that really did a number on the roofs, right? It was a 3-story building, flat roof and all that kind of stuff, had a rubber roof. Really, I mean, the water got in and it expanded, big old ice chunks. It was peeling things out, and I had to decide what was more important, right? With about $35,000, if not more, the roofs of that building, or to sell the building, move into someplace that I could rent and save the school, not the location, the dojo, the group of people that make up. Obviously, I made my choice. However, the difference between the two dojo environmentally is the only windows we had in the old building was the front doors and the back doors, which were glass. In the front, there were double doors. In the back, it was a single door. But that was the only light source coming in. If we turned off the lights, we could hang black plastic, really, really small pieces, right? Large garbage bags or whatever at the doors, and it would be dark in there. Here, I've got windows. I have more windows than wall space. And if I don't have windows on the wall, we've got mirrors, like a whole wall full of mirrors. They were here when we moved in. I didn't change it because it gives students a chance to do mirror work and whatnot, right? But there's a shopping complex across the highway, and right across from our dojo, there's a Red Robin. It's a hamburger joint for those people who don't, overpriced hamburger joint for people who don't know what they are. But part of the parking lot, right? The cars pull into the spot, and the headlights point in our direction. So what we found very quickly was we would either have to train much later at night, or we would have to hang black plastic and block most of that stuff out, because no matter how dark the place was, we had a lot more light coming through based on the skies, based on headlights and reflection of headlights from normal traffic. And then when somebody pulled into one of those parking spots, it could be the only one. They pulled in, 2 headlights, normal intensity, no high beams or anything like that, right through the windows, right off the mirrors, and it lit the whole place up. So we have storage areas, big storage areas. So we had people going into our large restrooms and changing rooms and stuff like that, and then closing the doors or bringing the curtains across so that they could actually apply the stuff that I was demonstrating out here, and they could be in the dark and working it that way. Okay, so even here, it's not easy to do that kind of thing, right? So anyway, back to rhythmic disruption. Rhythmic disruption also includes mimicking or masking your movement with natural environmental sounds, right? Rustling of leaves, if it's a really, really blustery, for us, an autumn day, leaves are down and they're just everywhere. Or we live in, like I said, semi-rural. There's a main highway right out in front of us. I don't mean like an interstate, but it's a 4-lane highway. So there are tractor trailers and all that stuff going by. You learn very, very quickly, right? That when that truck goes by, you don't have to worry about this. He just covered that up for you, right? So no matter how slow you needed to move originally, when he goes by, you haul ass. Or if we're adapting to moving shadows, because depending on where the moon is or light sources, those headlights or whatever, I may have to be in hiding. Never look at a light source in the dark. Your eyes will light up and glow just like a cat's that's hiding in the bushes outside or whatever, right? Or an owl. Same thing, right? Dead giveaway, right? Placement of our eyes. It's either an owl who's on the freaking ground and not in a tree, or it's a cat, but that's a pretty big freaking cat. Right? So anyway, but when that comes by and intercepts in between them, I have a short run because it's going to cast a shadow, and it's going to be a moving shadow. So I don't need to only exploit stationary shadows. I can use that. If I'm in an area, the flyover areas are of the United States. That was a big hit piece during the recent a couple of political cycles. Doesn't really matter. But the flyover areas, not all of them get flyovers, right? But if you are lucky enough to be in a place where you're on a flight path for, let's say, Cessna or lower flying aircraft, or you're in a region where it's dark, low light, whatever, and you're near an international airport, okay? That plane going over will do the same thing, mask that sound, Okay. So we have to think more dynamically and less statically because ego wants everything to be static, right? If I can just memorize a short list, I got it. Because most people are going to go through this training either today or for however long this YouTube exists and this is out there, hopefully long after I die. But anyway, they're going to go through this. Less than 1% of all that ever watch it are going to try any of this stuff. And most of them are going to try it once or twice and never do it ever again, assuming that they know it. Forgetting that their bodies age. They might have to do it while they're injured. Right? Anyway, or carrying a new child, carrying one that you rescued, having somebody else along that's limping. Right? Interesting. I think so anyway. What the hell do I know? But again, we could use distant footsteps, right? If they're alerted to somebody else walking, it could be one of their own allies, right? Gets their attention. I can use that. But what I have to be able to do is mimic that pace. So I have to be a master of walking to be able to match that rhythm, to be able to match that weightedness and that pattern. So I've got to have ears that are tuned. This is where study of languages and stuff like that comes in, or at least study of certain parts of neurolinguistic programming and things where you're paying attention to inflection, you're paying attention to tone, to pitch, those kind of things, right? So people that have music backgrounds and whatnot have a heads up on this kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where am I going with this? Bum, 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 bum. Okay. So I'm going to come back to the rhythmic disruption again here in just a minute. Let's jump over here to these key tactical principles. Okay. Very, very quickly. All right. So again, the moon, this element, put this in parentheses, this moon element is the guiding principle in the Togakure-Ryu, right? So for Togakure Genin Ninja, they're going to be exploiting this, especially when it's stealth, low light. And again, low light doesn't have to be outside, darkness. I could have been trying to get away from a gang or a group of thugs or who knows, right? Somebody that's just jacked about me and I'm being targeted and whatnot. I run into an empty building and there's no light. One, that's awesome. Get really comfortable with the darkness. Human beings are born innately wired to fear the dark. We have to get over it. Okay? If we're going to use it as a weapon, we can't be terrified while we're in there. Because if we're terrified, it's going to increase our adrenal response. Our movements are going to be more herky-jerky. They're going to be heavier, right? We're going to scuff our feet, or we're going to bump into things. We're not going to have as much fine motor control. And so that's going to cause a problem. Our breathing is going to become short, heavy, and raspy. Okay. Bad news. Okay. Bad news. All right. So again, key concepts here very quickly. We're just going to do this in groups of three, right? So moon is a guiding principle. One, reflection. Okay. So we're redirecting attention and energy. So reflection doesn't have to be light reflecting off of something else, right? We can reflect or redirect attention. We could toss a freaking, that's the toss the stone or whatever. I got another one for you later on, but where you're using sound, right, to get them to look, okay? Or we're redirecting energy, as in there's if the wind's blowing really, really hard, okay? Or there's a barking dog, okay? And you're in between the barking dog and them. As soon as you move, the volume level of the barking dog goes up to their ears. Okay? So I either sit perfectly still and let it go until they move, and they're in a different relative position to that barking dog. Okay? If I don't move, see, cars do the same thing, buildings do the same thing, mailboxes, if they still exist, whatever, do the same noise dampening kind of thing. Okay? Or as they're moving, I can subtly shift so the volume of the barking dog never changes to their ears. Because it doesn't matter if they consciously detect it, they could subconsciously or unconsciously detect it, and then they would call it, I don't know what it was, man. I just got this weird feeling. Okay. It's just your subconscious talking to you, right? but there's no words to it. Right? So it makes you look in a certain direction or whatever. Okay. But we need to be really, really good at listening for stuff like that, because somebody could be sneaking up or at least walking and they're wearing a certain type of shoes, or they're going across grass or things like that. And you can't hear them. But I need to be paying attention around me, not just using these things, which are going to be highly ineffective in an actual dark area. I need to be focused more on other senses. Okay. Indirect illumination, right? Using what's already present, light sources, shadows, those kind of things, using them to control perception. Okay. Again, a lot of this stuff would take an entire training for it. So I'm giving you this, again, 30,000 foot dirigible or balloon over the sports stadium kind of thing. Okay. And the third one from this one is movement, right? Again, mimicking when we mimic somebody else's movement, we might even mimic sounds. Some people are good at bird sounds and all that kind of stuff, right? Don't make bird sounds that are not local. If there's a bunch of crows and you do a sparrow, it's going to stand out, okay? Or if there are crows and you do a raven, not the same, okay? So what we're doing with this movement is mimicking the moon's shifting position to remain elusive, right? The moon doesn't stay in the same place overnight, right? Moonrise, moonset, right? And it moves because it's in orbit between us and the sun. And anyway, right? So just like the sun's not always in the same place, okay? All right, so next one is using the environment to your advantage, okay? So again, there's some overlap, okay? Quick three on this is urban low light versus rural darkness. Okay, so I want to leverage artificial light, those shadows, and how they're created. Right, different bulbs, whether they're the LEDs now or they're the old mercury lamps or whatever, they have a different color, and the kind of shadows that they produce are different. Right, reflected light, and then the trailing shadow from that has a different quality to it. But again, I want to leverage these things. I want to leverage sound also in an urban setting, okay? Because if I can distract him and get him to go look at something else, right, the better, okay? Silhouetting, okay? So forcing the attacker into visible outlines while you remain unseen. Got some extra stuff here at the end. I've got 4 areas on how to use silhouetting tactically, right, in an actual engagement, okay? But again, what I'm doing is I'm forcing the attacker into visible outlines so it's easier for me to see him while I'm remain in a position where it's very, very difficult for him to see me. Okay? And we can do that very close to somebody, right, like fight range, okay, fisticuff range. And then using the ground as concealment, okay, lowering your posture, to blend in with darker surfaces, that kind of stuff. We're going to be doing techniques in Friday's virtual class, the master class, but the lights are going to be on and stuff, because what's important that I convey to students is how to move and how to move into these things. It's not like they're going to be invisible to their uke. I need, if you sign up for that class, I need you to be able to understand what's going on in the unseen area around the attacker, okay? So you'll have to do this again some other time with a training partner where you can try it out when it's dark, okay? And we can't forget also that as a part of kind of ancillary kind of things that go along with stealth, that we have like clothing, right? The type of clothing that we're wearing and all that will ultimately always affect, right, how stealthy we can be. There's a bunch of other stuff too. One just came to mind. Smell. Right? If you're somebody who needs prescription strength pharmacological underarm deodorant, I know a couple of people like that. I went to basic training with one. This guy came out of a shower, get nervous because the drill sergeants were coming, and just start reeking. Right? You know what we call them in the stealth world? We call them distractions. Right? Same thing with sound. Right? If you have joints that incessantly pop and crack, right? For whatever reason, right? My wife is like that. Everybody has things that happen every once in a while. If that happens, you just go silent. You just stop moving, right? Because there's always stray sounds in the world, right? Because he'll stop and he'll listen. He's listening to see if he can hear it again. If he doesn't, right? Like one of my teachers said, we were out in the woods one time and he had us just all stop, like literally stop moving and just listen. And you could hear twigs snap or whatever. And he says, that could be an animal moving. It could just be decay, right? And it just snaps. But keep listening. Have you heard anything snap followed by shit? Right? So even going, tightening up and a little, it starts to become a dead giveaway because these things they build on each other, right? So we have to be careful to be able to control ourselves, all that kind of stuff, right? So next one is deceptive tactics. Deceptive tactics. Okay, again, top three here, or actually for this one I have two. So one is breaking the line of sight, which we always do anyway. We in normal taijutsu, and this is where things get confusing for some people, because ego wants to take one principle, we do this, and apply it universally, when sometimes the answer is the opposite. For instance, the principles we use for standing in taijutsu, almost all of them, 90%, are exactly the opposite when we're doing ground fighting, because all the stuff that we use standing is based on neutralizing and controlling balance or breaking his. When you're both on the freaking ground, that's like maybe 5% of that fight, because he can't break your balance. You're already on the ground, and depending on somebody's position, mounted, weight position, structure, and all that kind of stuff, you don't break balance the same way. It doesn't work that way. Okay, I know this is tough. That's why I gave you the warning at the very beginning, right? Which is, if this seems like it's too much and this isn't necessary, then just keep doing what you're doing. Okay. All I'm doing is coming at this from a direction where, instead of talking about more techniques and more skills, we're going to be taking a look at skills and techniques that we already have, walking, rolling, those kind of things, and applying it in a different environment, in a different scenario. Right? It's like people need to get their ass out of the dojo and go to a park or go to a kid's playground when there's no kids around and stuff like that, and do your training in and around all the swings and shit like that, where you'd have obstacles and whatnot, because in the dojo, everything's flat and sanitary. People go out of their way to find flat, open spaces to train. That's not bad, right? It eliminates a whole bunch of problems for you, and nothing's in your way. But at some point, this is just a suggestion. You can do whatever the hell you want because you're all adults. However, you're going to need to get out on an uneven surface. You're going to need to train in different types of clothing that you would be wearing it at different times of your life, including church and the funeral home, if that's the only time you wear suits and nice shoes. Okay, because I promise you, that's going to influence how you move. Okay, have somebody get into a restroom stall, with the toilet's right behind you. Okay, have the door open, because you just walk in, turn around, and this person reaches out to grab or punch or kick or whatever, and do your stuff from in there. Okay? Because you know what? That's more possible than somebody walking in the door of my dojo. That's possible as well, which is why we have a dojo invader system here, where there's certain things that people are responsible for doing to make sure that this person is controlled and either escorted back out, or at the very least, we don't lose. Okay? But chances of somebody coming in here to attack somebody mid-class. We do have one student, female, who has some problems with an ex-boyfriend who, instead of finding somebody else, and he lives miles and miles and miles away. He knows when she's in class, so he'll drive by up to the red light up here out on the lane in front of the dojo, and then rev his hot rod engine. Right? She's like, "Oh, he's out there again," and I laugh. I just walk over to the window. Which car? That one? Fantastic. I have one more piece of information. Right? Because he just makes me laugh. Because if he had balls, he'd come in here and try to strike up a conversation with her. Because he doesn't, but thinks he does, he tries to intimidate somebody, but he's not going to come in here with people that can have a different type of conversation with him, okay? Without being intimidating. But he's already intimidated. See, that's the thing, right? Another aspect of stealth in plain sight in our lives as ninja is, look, you think most people take me seriously? Old, bald, fat, what? Okay? Because they're thinking from the perspective of being in a boxing ring or an MMA fight and fighting for 2-minute, 5-minute rounds, whatever. Okay? Not, you come to me with your fist, I'm going to pull my clip knife, or I'm going to grab one of the goddamn weapons behind me, and this is going to get really interesting really fast. Okay? So, and this is going to be over. It's going to be over fast. Right? Not that I'm never going to lose. Shit happens. Anyway, all right. So where I was going with that is in normal stuff, we are on their line of sight, because if you break their line of sight, they can see you moving sooner. Their subconscious, their amygdala will fire, and they can see you moving. So we want to move in line with that. That's why the sword in Ichi no Kamae is pointed straight at them. It disguises the length of the weapon. There's all kinds of benefits for this. Okay, but in stealth, tactical movement in darkness, we want to break their line of sight. We want to come in from odd angles where their brain can't do the triangulation to tell distance, to tell shape properly, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's why in certain scenarios, if you want to disguise what you look like, okay, you make sure that you fight this way or you fight this way, because it changes the shape, or you fight this way where they can't get a full detailed look at what you look like if you're fighting like this. Okay, it makes identifying you harder. Right? Let's see. Movement and stealth. Right, that's our number 4. Movement and stealth. Stealth. Okay, movement, stealth. Right. Again, with this one, this is like stealth walking, stealth rolling. What the hell's that? Okay, so urban stealth. This is tough because we need to avoid hard surfaces, because hard surfaces amplify sound. Okay, like if I can step on grass, right, and or roll in that direction or whatever, right. If there's a pile of rags I happen to be in a machine shop or a mechanics place or whatever, I'm going to roll across that little bit of a pile because it's going to muffle things, right? Really important stuff. Okay, I will avoid gravel driveways. Just like if I were in the woods, I want to avoid piles of leaves. I want to avoid dry twigs and stuff like that. Now, if I can't, we have certain stepping patterns for that. Okay? That's why there's like 7 different types of stealth walking, right? So anyway, also there's shadow rolling, right? Using rolls, using low profile movements and stuff like that to reposition from one point to another, okay? And so some of that is backwards as well, right? When we're telling some people to go back into Ichimonji, there should be a descending move. Your lead leg is proactive when going back into Ichimonji, right? So my head should move. See, it moves at a diagonal. See that? It moves this way. But a lot of beginners, what they'll do is they'll sink and move, or they'll move and then drop. Okay, so that breaks his eye line. But in stealth, if I happen to be in front of him and he sees me for a moment and I move away, I am going to move either this way or I'm going to drop and then break, because there's something that's going on here with light and shadow. And that is, if I can get low enough, I can silhouette him against the night sky and blend into the darkness of the ground. So it's easier for me to see where he is and where his body parts are, and it's harder for him to see where I am. So if I sink before I break off and roll, his brain's going to follow that linear line, and he's going to move into that. Meanwhile, I've moved to another position and can tag him from a different angle. Okay? There's a technique we're going to be doing on Friday where I will show where you can be in one position and hit him using one of the Sanshin movements, hit him on another part of his body. So when he turns to deal with that problem, you're going to attack him from a different position. This doesn't just have him disoriented because you're hitting him from multiple directions. See, I keep saying you're hitting him because it's just you. When we do the technique, it'll just be you doing it. But his brain will either get really, really suspicious or suddenly fear that another combatant came into the fight because he got attacked on one side and the opposite side, and you can't be in two places at the same time. And if you can be, he needs to get the fuck out of there. And if you had somebody join the fight to take care of him, he needs to get the fuck out of there. Okay? So this disorientation is really, really important. We already talked about rhythmic disruption. Did I put that in there? Nope. Put that down here. All right. So rhythmic disruption. All right. So we already talked about that. That was the varying your movement speed. We'll see what kind of time we have on Friday. If we don't do it on Friday, I have plans to do this during our upcoming Daikomyo side because the entire weekend we're working on Togakure secrets. So I'm going to show people how to change the speed of their roll mid-roll. So he sees you go into the roll at a certain speed, and you're going to come out 1.5 to 2 times faster, right? Also going to show how to change direction mid-roll, okay? So that whatever line his brain was following when you went into the darkness where you become harder to see, you're not going to be there. And it doesn't require 2 rolls. That's cool shit. If the fat guy can do it, everybody else can do it, okay? And again, mimicking environmental sounds and all that, okay? So there's defensive and offensive kind of things. We'll talk about that some other time. I'll cover that on Friday. So, you know what? We're going to split this out because I'm running out of time. Well, you know what? I'll do it really, really fast, okay? So the expanded tactics for silhouette and shadow manipulation. I don't want to leave you hanging, okay? So one is using shadows cast by objects, okay? Using shadows cast. Okay, so these are being cast by objects, stationary objects. Okay, I'm not going to go into these that much, that deeply, but what we're talking about here is environmental shadows, right? Parked car, telephone pole, building, whatever. Okay, so you have 3 different things in here. You have dynamic shadowing, which is utilizing shadows created by nearby objects. Again, like the cars, the walls, the trees, that kind of stuff. You have shadow movement. I talked about that before. When the truck went by, right? That is, you're going to move in sync with the shadows cast by these objects, including him or one of his compatriots. Because depending on the light source, he could cast a really long freaking shadow and a wide one. Just stay in the shadow. Right? He's the moon on an eclipse day. Okay? See, moon includes eclipse, okay? And then blend and reappear. So we disappear into a long shadow cast by a building, and then we reappear from another unexpected direction, exploiting the attacker's confusion, that kind of stuff, right? So next one is hiding in the opponent's shadow. I just talked about that, okay? Sorry, I crossed over, right? Hiding in his shadow. Okay, so close range deception, right? By staying close to the attacker and positioning yourself within their shadow, you can make it difficult for them to locate you visually, especially under low light conditions. You add low light and shadows, and there's also shadow layering, right? You could be in a shadow in a low light area where it's easier for him to see you, but if you can position yourself with your tactical maneuvering between the lights, put him between the light source and you, his shadow overlays that, making that darker. It's like putting a filter on top of another filter and everything gets darker, right? So where are we on that one? Oh, cautionary tale on this, okay? If you stink, they can detect you easier. I don't care if I talked about BO before, but this could be cologne. Some of you guys don't use any, and some of you guys use it like you work in a brothel. I know you're trying to get the girls, but you need to strike a happy medium between not knowing when bad shit could happen and attracting the women. Okay, is what it is, right? So, and then blindside maneuvers. This is using proximity concealment, right? To angle around behind them or to blindside them or whatever. What you're doing is keeping them unaware of your actual position. Okay. Very quickly here, shadows as distractions themselves. Shadows as distractions. Okay. So with this one, what we're looking at here is creating misdirections, just like a magician or illusionist who's using sleight of hand or misdirection, right? So we exploit shifting shadows. What the hell is that? If there's a breeze going and you're near a tree, if the tree's limbs are moving and the leaves are moving, so's its shadow. If that's not moving and that is, run. If that's moving and that isn't, run faster. Okay? So we need to stop going through the world like everybody else. If you want to be a ninja, if you want to live and think and act like a ninja, you cannot look at things, see things, operate based on beliefs or whatever like the average person, because they're not paying attention. Okay? Not paying attention. Okay? So, but we can create shifting shadows as well. Okay? By doing that, what we can do is like we can kick an object to create a movement, right? So this is not the same as tossing a stone. Let's say I drop down or whatever, and there's a freaking old tire that's laying right there. I slowly pick that up because I have to worry about sound, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I push it or I move it so it rolls. Now I want to push it or roll it in a certain direction where the lights, so it's between the light source and his peripheral vision or whatever. So when it goes across, right, the shadow catches his attention first because he's looking here. And he's going to trace the shadow back so he can identify what's making it. By the time he realizes that it's a tire and it's moving, and his brain has to get back on track with finding you should be somewhere else. If you're not, well, then you wasted an opportunity and you blew off some energy pushing something that you probably shouldn't have. Okay. Another thing is to manipulate a light source to cast multiple confusing shadows. Okay. You could, if you're in a room, maybe there's not indirect lighting, but maybe it's a desk light. So there's a cord on it. Okay. And so as he turns to walk, I pull on the cord so it turns the light and it moves the light source, and that changes all of the lighting and the shadowing in the room. That simple direction of the light. Try that sometime. Okay. And then the other one is practical applications. Okay. Just right. What this generally leads to is you paying attention and doing the work. Okay. So here's the thing. We're going to break this into urban settings and rural settings. In urban settings, city, mostly sidewalks, that kind of stuff, right? Okay. We're going to leverage street lights, headlights, building mounted lights to create or to obscure shadows. Okay. Another way that you can work shadows and stuff and to do this and use shadows as a distraction is there was a shadow there a second ago, and then you redirected a light source. Tactical flashlight. We could point at his eyes and blind him. Right? Now you're invisible. That's Mitsubishi, right? In this case, what I can do is shine that light. And again, you're going to need some practice with this. Shine that high beam light across that thing. If you're not in fog, mist, there's not a lot of like particulates in the air and whatnot, he's not going to see the beam. He's going to see, and if you have it at an angle where it's not hitting like this, it's going across like this, okay? What it does is it erases or minimizes the shadow so that area looks different. Somehow it looks different. And that will make two different people looking for you do two different things. One, He's going to go away. And the other one is going to go to try to figure out what the hell just happened. Right? While he's moving, you move. Right? Because at some point you have to turn that off, or maybe you could lay it down and mount it. That way when you take off, because at a certain point, he's going to recognize that there's a light source. He's going to follow the light source. You shouldn't be there. Okay? You know how much I paid for that tactical flashlight? I don't give a shit. Was it more than you're worth? Okay. In rural settings, use the moonlight and natural landscape to blend into shadowy areas while forcing the attacker into open light or silhouetted positions. Okay. That's that kind of thing. All right. So during Friday's class, we're going to take a look at stealth rolling. We're going to take a look at some low-level stealth movement, walking kind of techniques, and we're going to put that some things together with a couple of techniques so that we can at least understand the movement and how that would cause somebody, you to disappear, him to be silhouetted, that kind of thing. Again, we're going to do it in the light because I've got people signed on for a Zoom class, but it's something that we're going to do for a night exercise at some point, maybe at an upcoming camp or whatever. Anyway, that's what I have for this one. Hopefully you'll get signed up. It's been there the whole time, right? The link to get yourself signed up for this Friday's masterclass. Hopefully you'll make it. If not, I think I've given you more than enough to keep you busy for, I don't know, 6 months, a year, right? Even if you don't do anything with us, okay? If you have any questions, comments, that kind of thing, as long as they're respectful, okay? Feel free to put them in the comment areas. We try to check on things as much as possible, but we get tons of people sending us stuff. So I will do my best to make sure that I respond to things, even if it's just to say hi back. All right. But that's what I have. Okay. So hopefully I will see you again for next week's Whiteboard Wednesday. Hopefully I'll see you in the class. But if not, at least then.